Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, what's up?
What's up, buddy? I'm gonna be just journalistic integrity. I'm already recording, so don't start.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
What's up, man? How's it
Yo,
going?
what's up? Nothing much.
Wonderful. So, if you want, we'll just get straight into it. You said 60 to 90 minutes. I don't see this going that long. Um, I'm not a great
Perfect. Yeah, good,
interviewer.
good. Shorter is
Wonderful.
good too.
Yeah, people don't have that kind of attention. But I guess for a podcast, it's good. But I don't know. I haven't even released a podcast, so we'll see how that goes. But
Yo, is that the
welcome.
real VJ Prashad?
That's the real Vijay Prashad we had in here. And I fucked up the interview completely. I had him in here. We had such a good talk. And I wasn't recording. Like I was recording and it cut out right at the start. And I lost everything except for like 10 minutes.
Damn, that sucks.
Yeah, that's tremendous hell. But I know you're going to put on a wonderful show today. We're going to have a wonderful talk and it's going to be a great episode. So I'm going to focus on that. All right. Well,
Yeah, for sure.
welcome as our first full episode to Pamphlets Pod. I'm going to be asking you today. We discussed a little bit about some misconceptions about the American Communist Party, a little bit about where you stand on certain issues, and just in general, who you are, what is your project, what are you doing?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Okay. That was a very vague question, so I'll just try to give it to you more straight. What is the
Oh, is that a
American?
question? Okay, I got you. Yeah,
No
all right.
worries, no worries.
Yeah, well, the you should know maybe the context. Maybe that'll help. Because nobody really cared about the Communist Party in America until Infrared, which is it's a multimedia collective that launched around 2020 and started gaining prominence in 2021 when I started streaming. But anyway, one of the first things Infrared, or basically what I was telling my community about in terms of what the move is for Praxis, was join the Communist Party USA and revive it. We only have one Communist Party. And it's there's this endless cycle of sectarianism where everyone's splintering because they have a specific take on things, and they have a specific idea, and they have a this and a that, and it's only way to end the cycle is just straight up just commit to one party and just make it better, and it is the Communist Party institutionally, it has formal continuity, and just starting a party based on your specific ideology is just, and when I say that, I don't mean that I agree with pan leftism. It's more actual communist politics with a capital C, meaning Marxism, Leninism. That's not just an that's not an ideology, that's actually a real, material form of praxis that gets institutionalized, or it's actually leaves a footprint in history. So my whole thing was look, the Communist Party USA, it's in terrible shape, but go and let's revive it and reinvigorate it, make it independent from the Democrats, and let's just have the Communist Party, straight up. No more of this democratic socialist BS and all this nonsense.
Right.
So if we're Marxist Leninists, let's just commit to it, right? So I did that. People started doing it, started gaining traction. And then sometime around the summer, I guess the feds sent this weird woman named Taryn Fivek. She's got a super sketchy background. She knows five different languages. She's was part of, she wrecked Workers World, which was a Trotskyite organization. She's this super sketchy background. I think she's the daughter of some prominent media. I think CNN. So I don't know. I don't quote me on that, but she straight up right away tried to block this without even knowing who I was or who we were. I guess we like ringed. Like, look, people know that the CPUSA it's like super infiltrated by feds, like, and it has been for decades. Like, it's not even like a conspiracy theory, right? It's like the
I've
FBI's
heard
admitted
this.
this. Yeah, like they still have people that are just like there, just to like to ensure they have control, right? So I just wanted to test the waters and like see how true that was in practice. It's like actually crazy because like when my people started joining, it like triggered these alarm bells, I guess, for like the feds that like, oh shit, you know, this dormant dead organization is like getting a new burst of energy. We got to shut this down wherever it's coming from. And like that's kind of like where a lot of the trouble for infrared began in the tanky sphere. I obviously like had always been fighting the bread tube people and like all those libtards or whatever. But like in the quote unquote tanky sphere, we started being controversial because we were doing that. And that's when like the major giant attacks on infrared started to get launched because we were fucking with the CPUSA, like straight up, right? So like lo and behold, all these like disgusting libtards started sending people into the CPUSA and encouraging it just to counteract what we were doing. Like it was my idea to revive it, right? But they literally just started sending their own people to block us. These like were like incredibly um like I don't even know what I would say. They were just liberals. They had no discipline. They had no like vision for reviving the Communist Party. They just had like the intention to block us and stop us from getting anything off the ground because they were terrified of this like new communist subculture emerging that like infrared was heralding in a lot of ways, right?
To what
So that
degree?
happened.
Sorry to butt in.
Yeah.
But to what degree do you feel that the CPUSA is captured by the FBI or whatever forces of
No, it
state?
is. It is. Like we knew that it was theoretically, but like I actually wanted to see practically, like to what extent that was true. Like I wanted to actually test this, right? Like everyone used to say it, but like I wanted to actually like test it, you know, just to see like what wiggle room do we have to like challenge that. Anyway, yeah, it's absolutely captured, like 1000%. I could get into more details about. I'll get into more details about that actually as I continue the story. So
Okay.
anyway, look. Um, So the CPUSA leadership was always averse to like these crazy like ultra left types that were like you know young. I guess I don't know what to call them like crazy libtards, right? But they realized like okay, they made a deal with the devil. They joined in an alliance hand in hand. The Democrats plus these like ultra leftists like Sakaius, I don't know what I would call them, the people that like say read settlers or whatever. Like they joined hand in hand to block us. And that was like a temporary alliance they made just to like stop us. Like we had this really, really powerful vision of making the CPUSA like an independent working class party that is mainstream, that is like popular, that is like the move, that is this like HQ of a totally new like left wing revival where like there was no more political correctness, but in contrast to like the dirtbag leftists or whatever, like it was independent totally from Democrats and completely. And you know, it had that kind of like vibe of like going against this stuffy like institutional DSA culture and all this shit. And they were trying to like block this at all costs. It's super viable. Like feds knew that, right? Anyway, so they made that alliance and they, you know, eventually, the day came, I think it was like November or something. They actually wrote like an article like denouncing me. They were like, infrared is not welcome in the party, straight up. And that was a decisive moment. So like after that, there was this dynamic within the party where like these ultra leftists who hated infrared because they're sectarians and they're just um I'll be real, like a lot of them are mentally disabled. It's just the truth. And these like feds like Taryn Fivek and the institutional establishment within the CBUC, I'll talk about that more in a sec. They, you know, consolidated control basically, and they officialized the view that like if you watch infrared, if you're with infrared, if you like are a fan of me, if you like watch my streams even, you are banned from the party. So they tried to like purge everyone, but before they could, I was like, all right, guys, listen. There's something called taqiyya, right? It's like from Shia Islam. Basically means like when
I'm
you're
familiar. Yeah.
yeah. So I told them, look, now we have to do taqiyya, all right? Just like straight up pretend to be like a libtard and you know, just don't be open about your views and commit to building the party practically. You know, do whatever you got to do to prove yourself in the party, rise the ranks, do what you got to do, stay in the party. And in like 3 years, when they have their national convention, which was in 2024, or at that time it was supposed to be in 23, actually, in 2 years. Just like vote for our people, straight up, kick these boomers out and take back the party. Like, if they want to fucking start violating their constitution in this way and getting rid of free conscience, that you can't even watch me as a streamer, and they're not even willing to debate or have any open discussion about it, then don't. Just like wait till their elections and take it over through that way, right? So like CPUSA has always been part of like Infrared's mission, right? We had this meme. It was like CPUSA 2036. We're gonna make it a powerful, strong party by 2036 with millions and millions of people. Like that was the vision. That was the dream, right? And some crazy shit happened. So they actually delayed their national convention by 1 year just because they were terrified that we were going to take it over. They literally said we're postponing it by a year so they could further consolidate control and block us out. And even then, I was like, fuck, I guess we got to wait another year. So it was supposed to be 23, and they delayed it 1 year to 24 just because they were terrified of what we were doing, right? So 24 comes around, and um, this is after like Biden is in office and there's a Gaza genocide, right? So the 32nd National Convention, that's when we decided we were gonna. All we ever cared about was making them independent from Democrats. When we say we wanted to take it over, we meant we wanted to make it independent of Democrats, like straight up, build up the party like as an independent thing. And in the context of this Gaza genocide that was overseen by the Democrats, what we were pushing in the lead up to the 32nd National Convention was a discussion and debate about Resolution 5, a debate about the strategy of the CPUSA regarding U.S. elections. Is the priority to stop Trump, or should the priority be to build the party up as an independent force? Because in practice, they had this resolution. It's like, we're going to just focus on stopping fascism. In practice, it means they're going to tail the Democrats and just go with Democrats, right? So we found ourselves. I'll just be straight up with you. Like, the people who actually started the petition movement is what it was called. Or that was later. That was later. The people who were trying to initiate discussion about this were our people. That's who started it. But some of like the libtards, the Sakai camp, the USU people, I don't know if you know who they are. They also like joined with us. They didn't know it was us. They had no idea who our people were. If they knew, they probably wouldn't have joined. But they saw this as like totally spontaneous, and they joined in with us, right? And what we were doing was totally like legal in terms of the party's rules. We weren't like breaking the party's rules. It was just and that was proof of it. Like, people had the right to challenge this like dogmatic line of just like tailing and following Democrats, right? So for the first time, we found ourselves allied with these like crazy libtards who always wanted to like destroy us and call us pat socks and all this nonsense. We were on the same side as them for that whole ordeal, right? And finally, it started to get revealed kind of who was in charge of CPUSA. These boomers, right? So a lot of people don't know this, but where the money comes from for CPUSA, it comes from People's World. So if you know what People's World is, it's this like newspaper, but it's legally the corporation that owns everything, right? And People's World is owned legally by two people. One of them is named Sam Webb. I don't know if you know who Sam Webb is. Sam Webb is the guy who like tried to liquidate CPUSA and turn it into like a different party, because he was like, well, I'm done with the communism thing. I'm just a liberal now. So Sam Webb was like the high point of the CPUSA's decline into like revisionism in the 2000s. He owns People's World along with a guy named John Bechtel. who's also just a liberal. He's not even a communist, right? And Joe Sims gets paid by these people. Like they actually functionally own the party. So the reason the party like has to tail the Democrats, even like financially, is because they get paid by People's World that actually owns all the wealth and assets of CPUSA. It's owned by People's World. I could be wrong maybe about this, I don't know, but this is what I was told by trusted sources. Anyway, so like that's what we're dealing with, this like legacy boomer establishment. And is there Fed involvement? Probably. Taryn Fivek was there. I'm just gonna straight up say she's a Fed. Like I couldn't see any other rational explanation for like what this woman is and who she is. Anyway, so they basically rigged the national convention. They didn't even count the votes. They didn't have any discussions or tolerate any debates about their resolutions that were like centrally dictated. I covered all of this while it was going down. And, you know, if this outcome happened, which I anticipated it might like a year before, I had already made plans for like, okay, if they rig their election, then we're going to just consider their party liquidated, just like what was it in the 48 they had something called they liquidated the party into like the Communist Political Association or something, and they had to reconstitute it because it had been liquidated, you know. And I was like, this is a similar situation. We just have to reconstitute the party. It's been liquidated. Like it literally doesn't even have formal democracy anymore. They just straight up rigged it. And it's just like functionally obsolete. I mean, it had been for a while, but now formally the liquidation had been solidified. So the contingency plan was we're just going to reconstitute it. And I liked the acronym ACP better because that shit goes hard. It's like
It's
45
shorter.
ACP.
It's better.
It's shorter, it's better, and it goes hard. It's like militant sounding in a way, you know? And it's like totally a different vibe, you know? And also it's better for our historical situation because to be real, like the USA is breaking apart and it's probably not going to exist like in the next 2 decades. It's probably going to like itself be reconstituted.
And
Like
I'd
the
like
USA constitutionally is already dead. It's just inertia now, just like the Soviet Union under Gorbachev. And we're probably going to see a civil war or some crazy shit go down where there's just not going to be a USA anymore, right? So like American Communist
all
Party is
right. Let me
like
jump in here because we're
yeah,
getting a little bit off
yeah,
track. Or in my view of the
yeah,
conversation, we're getting a little bit off track. Uh,
yeah.
I think we're now veering into just the national question of the United States, which I think you have a very unique view on. I think you're correct in your analysis that the U.S. state is now just inertia, that it's declining, and that it's likely it won't last much longer. In your view, what is the American nation?
Oh yeah, that's a pretty good question. So I think that the American nation is actually like not finished in terms of the process by which nations come to be. I think that the American national project is unique in a lot of ways because it is about it is forced to rediscover how nations are born in the first voluntarist who thinks you can just create nations based on ideas in your head. That's ridiculous. But what connection do nations actually have in terms of how they form to principles, to unifying principles? Now, a principle doesn't have to be an idea, it doesn't have to be a thought. For example, you could speak of functional principles, just law, laws.
You're
This
cutting
is
out a little
America.
bit.
The story of America is a story of what?
Oh, sorry, the connection was cutting out a little bit. But carry on.
Oh, where did you last hear me?
You
Yeah,
were
yeah,
mentioning that
yeah. I think that
the
yeah,
principles of
yeah. I think
something can be
America is
functional.
like
Just
forced.
go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, a principle, right? See, we get this idea that nations just come from the past. Their origins are mysterious, and there's no active connection between the emergence of nations and the fundamental unifying principles. of social existence or of societies and of history. Now, let me clarify what I mean. We tend to think nations are just this archaic inheritance of something that happened thousands of years ago, and we have no business kind of thinking about what active relationship we have to those premises. But what does history show us? The thing that glues together nations actually isn't just this passive, like, accident from the past, but revolutionary circumstances. You know, the French nation was really truly born at by the French Revolution. You know, that's what fundamentally defined that nation.
Even more so
I would
for
argue that the
Italy.
entire former,
To butt
yes,
in, sorry,
Italy, and I would argue that, yeah,
I'm just gonna talk because I figure if I just keep waiting for a pause, we're gonna have a little bit more one-sided than I'd hoped for.
yeah, no
I
problem. Go
would
ahead.
like to deepen the question on the
Yeah.
American nation before we get into all of this theory. Um, what are the conditions of the nation of the United States today and when it's founded? You mentioned a lot Sakai and this criticism of those on the left, especially, that point at the United States and say that its national history or that its national birth was one, I don't know how you would characterize it, but racist in a very broad strokes. Do you feel that that is true? Do you feel that the U.S., I mean, obviously 300 years have passed. What is a positive vision for the Communist Party to offer of the American nation?
Yeah, no, I'll definitely get into that. The final thing I wanted to just say really quickly was that, you know, the former Soviet space, Russia and all the former Soviet countries, on a national level, I would argue they've been fundamentally, irreversibly defined by the October Revolution and the Soviet experience, and that actually has helped create what their national character is. But anyway, that's the thing I want to say. Now, your question, it's a very important question. I'll get right to it. I don't deny that the American revolutionaries were racist. I don't deny that the founding fathers were slave owners and they were racist. What I deny about Sakai is this notion that the British Empire had a historically progressive role and was just about to abolish all slavery, and that the American Revolution was actually reactionary, and it was a reaction by the slaveholders to preserve the institution of slavery. And I think it's just, first of all, it's ahistorical fact, ahistorical. Gerald Horne, this idea, but Sarah Sakai, but and it's incorrect because the only reason the British Empire had privilege of quote unquote abolishing slavery later was because of the British Industrial Revolution. And during the US Civil War, it was the British Empire that actually sided with the Confederacy against the North. So it's a completely ahistorical notion that on a fundamental level, the American Revolution was reactionary and it was just about preserving slavery. And that's what defined it.
I think
The
that
fact of the
is
matter is that in its,
I think
yeah,
that is very true. I think that the United States was and is seen often in the Western Hemisphere as the country that was the first to break away from Europe and have a national revolution. It happened before all of the other revolutions, but often in Latin America, there was a revolution of a different sort, where it was not simply the separation of the colony from the homeland, but also the social revolution. And in the case of the United States, to some extent,
right.
there was a social revolution, but I think for many people, that is the distinction made there. And I believe that the continuation or the
No,
secondary revolution with Lincoln is, another important part of the American project. Maybe even more of an example for us today because it was historically more progressive just by virtue of happening later.
no, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely correct. The 1776 didn't accomplish a social revolution. The aftermath, you know, the entrenched interests of the landholders and the people that gained their wealth under the British system of colonialism, they maintained their power. Okay, so Yeah, there were loyalists whose land was seized and expropriated. That was good.
Yeah.
But overall, I agree. There, relative to the American Revolution, the Thermidorians already prevailed, and there were no Jacobins that prevailed. That were there Jacobin tendencies there? Were there yeomen who had these aspirations that were participating in the social revolution? Absolutely. They did not prevail. I totally agree with that. I think that and I also think that the United States, from its foundation, had to compromise with slaveholding interests in the South. But that's different from saying that the revolution was driven by those slaveholders. The actual fact is that the American revolutionaries were pretty consistently critical of slavery as an institution, and what they did in the North was that they compromised with the planter class in the South because they feared, rightfully, which was true, that the class had an entrenched interest, a material incentive to just side with the British Empire, which they did. I mean, that's true. But
Well,
as a consequence of that
some of them.
compromise, there was
I would say there was definitely a division of the planter class because in
there,
Virginia
there
at the
was
time,
yeah.
many of the people who were prominent slave owners or land inspectors, just the entrenched interest, did end up siding against the empire, not for the ideological reasons, but for their material interest.
Yes, because the American revolutionaries to the north gave them the compromises that they wanted. That's why, and that's why there was this reactionary triumph in the aftermath of the revolution. I don't deny that at all. A lot of the structure of the United States, it is true, was this like reactionary victory for the planter class that had to be appeased. Now, do I think it had to be appeased myself? No, but from the perspective of the I guess principled American revolutionaries, who had no understanding of Marxism or class dynamics or anything like that, they were bourgeois revolutionaries. That it was necessary from their perspective. Um, so that's why it's always been an incomplete thing. And yes, you mentioned Lincoln and the U.S. Civil War. That was seen at the time as a continuation, like a continuation of the American Revolution that was unfinished, at the time. And I'm not here to just like idealize the American Revolution and say like, oh, it was a communist revolution and it had all these communist principles. Rather, I'm pushing back against the narrative which defends the British Empire and regards this revolution as reactionary relative to the British Empire. Finally, I think that the American Revolution, as you just pointed out, could vaguely and broadly be understood as, the first active principle emerging of a unified American state independent from Europe. Like foundationally, I think it can be that vague, you know? A unified American nation and state, independent from Europe, that is free to choose its own future based on the principles of national self determination and popular sovereignty, like we the people, one republic by, for, and of the people, right? That's an incredibly revolutionary and radical dream and vision, which was emerging in the context of all these various entrenched reactionary private interests. I definitely agree, but I think that the fidelity to the American national project can be seen historically from Midwestern Marx has this cool idea of the three American revolutions, like the first one, the Civil War, then you have the Civil Rights Movement in the post-war period, right? Because like the division between black and white and indigenous and others for that matter, that's a vestige of European colonialism.
Let's
So
talk a
like,
little bit. I'm sorry to butt in. Let's talk a little bit
yeah,
about the civil rights movement and about the United States before and
yeah,
after it. Because another common critique of the ACP, and you've mentioned the name several times, the specter haunting here, is Sakai and this idea of the settler state. To what extent do you agree that the United States before the civil rights movement was an apartheid or a settler state?
Look, it was an apartheid state because there was a segregation institutionalized from Jim Crow. You see, after the U.S. Civil War, the planter class just regrouped and became this landholder class that instituted Jim Crow. They reversed the gains of Reconstruction, and they institutionalized a type of racial antagonism between black and white poor workers as a way to, if you study the history, the whole point was dividing not just the workers, but even dividing the farmers. Because before the Jim Crow era, you had the emergence spontaneously of these populist parties, these farmers' alliances that cut across racial lines, that were demanding land reform, that were demanding checks on the landholder class. This is emerging in tandem with the growth of a multiracial industrial working class. So what the Southern Democrats did, the Southern Democratic Party was an organ of the landholding elites. They institutionalized these racial codes and racial animosity that they spread as literally just a divide and conquer tactic, right? So I don't agree with the Sakai analysis, which says that these white freeholders and white workers have this entrenched material interest to uphold Jim Crow and the system of racism, because it ignores how those people were duped and were totally bamboozled into actually sacrificing and giving up their material interests, which was land reform and the bettering of their own material conditions, in favor of this racial cannibalism, which didn't benefit them. Look at the Great Depression in the 1930s. Were the white quote unquote settlers benefiting from racism? No, they weren't. The racism was a stupidity in terms of the question of them fulfilling their material interests. It was something that was working against them, and so I don't like the framing which says that, all the reactionary forces in the US, that's actually in the people's interest, and therefore we should declare war on the people themselves. It's like, that's my issue. That's why I think it's a completely destructive narrative. It's basically saying that you're conceding the battleground of struggle to the enemy, more or less.
I understand what you mean by conceding the battleground, conceding the national identity, even the revolutionary identity of the United States, or the idea that there could be and should be a plurinational state within the United States. However, when you look at it from the outside, I think you also see the perspective of the imperial super profits flowing in from across the world into the United States. And to some extent, you can understand that these citizens of the United States were bamboozled or deceived, but to another point of view, it may seem that they're being bought off by this imperial loot to some extent. I think you mentioned that the United States is likely an unstable political formation, especially as this imperial decline sets in. So I think it's even more important to reassert this understanding of the American nation in a positive way, the American people in a positive way, and the American Party, if it is to be the ACP, in a positive way. Do you feel that the ACP is ready to lead the American people? And if not, what are the next steps?
Yeah, I want to make a quick comment on the super profits thing, because actually I don't entirely disagree. I just want to clarify an irony regarding that, right? I think the form that's taken in terms of dollar hegemony and how that's been used to bribe off the population, it was pre 2008 especially, where everyone was just taking on credit to like buy homes and finance their lives, And it's this like passive consumerism where people just kind of like want, the spice to flow, so to speak, to keep like buying dumb bullshit and barely working, um working stupid bullshit jobs and just kind of like being this mindless consumer who's like, it's almost like fentanyl. You're just kept hooked on like consumption, 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 through passive revenues, And like I think that's definitely a thing that exists, especially before 2008. And it's like that thing that is real, that is financed from the way that the U.S. Sells its treasuries abroad, and how the U.S. system is financed from the surpluses that are vacuumed across the entire world, and that creates a parasitic type of economy, and but that also corresponds to the degradation of the American people themselves. And the deindustrialization, the loss of productive jobs, the loss of dignified ways of life, the breakdown of norms, and the breakdown of like society itself in a lot of ways. But I would just add the caveat of an irony. Like the thing we advocate for is a kind of like reindustrialization, return to real jobs, return to a type of industrial autarky, and like yeah, everyone being sent back to the mines in a way, like with much shorter hours and better working conditions, but definitely like an emphasis on like productive labor. So there's no longer this parasitical form of existence of just leeching off of the revenues of the global surpluses. So like we've always had that position, and yet we're called fascists for that. And meanwhile, the democratic socialists like AOC and Zohran advocate for an expansion of U.S. imperialism in practice in order to just create like a passive redirection of revenues to like just give people free shit. And they don't care about the production side of things. They don't care about the question of reindustrialization. They just want to divert the super profits and distribute them differently, like literally just like the chauvinistic social democrats. During and after World War One. So yeah, I just find that ironic that people think we're reactionary and that our patriotism, which we do have, is pro-imperialist, when the real imperialists are people like Zohran, AOC, and these kind of like democratic socialist leftists that just basically want to expand the imperial system of finance in practice. But as to your broader question, we're definitely in a post 2008 world. And hold on, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can still
Can you
hear
hear me?
you. Yeah,
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 yeah. So to your question, the jig is up. So people are not being able to like make a living anymore in the U.S. They can't pay rent. Everything's too expensive. They're unable to get by. Groceries are too expensive. Life as it was normally experienced, to whatever extent people were being bribed off by imperialist super profits, that whole thing is breaking down, right? So, like, is
yeah,
the ACP prepared to lead the entire country? Well, we're only a year out. I would want to be a little more modest, but I think in principle we are. I think in spirit we are. I think that we absolutely have that ambition of being a party to lead the entire American working class and the American masses. But the problem is that um, it's just a matter of time. I mean, we've only existed for 1 year, and we are trying to do as much as we can to like prepare and endure this crisis. We don't expect we're going to be leading the crisis ourselves. We think the crisis, we don't have time for that, right? It's happening too fast. But we do think that if we get our shit together, we're going to weather the storm. And if we weather the storm, who's going to be remaining except the people who properly prepared for it? It's basically the mentality we have. We want to create a kind of dual power that's going to weather the storm. So that's why for us, it's not a race, it's a marathon. All we have to do is continue existing and continue organizing and having the solidarity that we do and overseeing operations that can just kind of be compatible with a normal flow of life and
Let's
control logistics and supply lines and things like that. And that's not like a exciting voluntaristic thing. We're just going to charge and be at the vanguard of this huge change that's going to happen in the US because we think that change is objective. It's not subjective. It's going to happen no matter what the political ideology it prevails. It's going to happen because of an objective historical contradiction at the heart of the US that's coming to a head.
let's talk a little bit about solidarity because you mentioned the solidarity necessary, and this to me sounds like what you would call maybe a very leftist value. It's a value that speaks about I guess the unity of all of the people. And I feel like you mentioned that there's often these attacks from the left, from the Democratic Socialists, maybe from other socialist parties, and you seem to perceive them as radical and ludicrous. And I think fundamentally there are two camps within the US left and the people that see the ACP as reactionary. And I think one of them is the land back crowd who sees the aesthetic desire to be associated with the American nation as reactionary. And I think that the other one is, and it's the criticism that I have mostly of the ACP, is a very, at least to me, and I think to the general public, a lack of clarity on your position when it comes to LGBT issues. Because the United States, this is a very popular thing. Many people, especially on what is called the left of the United States, are gay or are trans, and I think they feel that the party is hostile to them. And I don't know if the party institutionally is, but on Twitter, I can definitely tell you there's some people representing the party or claiming to represent the party with the symbols, and they're not talking in terms of solidarity at these times. Even with the classic example of the barista, who perhaps works in services, is not traditionally or technically a proletarian. What is the responsibility of a communist party to unite and lead the people, or are you more focused on weathering the storm, on creating, dual power? I don't know if you have a compound. What what do you
I
feel
mean,
about
I
this?
don't, sorry, yeah, I definitely don't have a compound.
Terrible.
But yeah, I mean, look, I know I sound like an insane prepper, but I think that the way to weather the storm is creating like organization. And the old way of organizing, like purely from the top down, where like the tastes and whims and fancies of a leader just gets imposed on, it's not like viable. The only way to organize is to create a principle that can reproduce even when the communication lines are cut and even when there isn't a lot of clarity about like what does the leader want or what does the leadership demand. Are we a democratic centralist organization? Yeah, but organization and how to organize, it's really just about unifying people on common principles such that people can be united and work together and pool together their resources and abilities for common goals, right?
To
But
what extent are you
yeah,
prepared to work with other socialist parties? For example, the PSL, Freedom Road.
we don't. The problem's not on our end. Like, we're totally fine with that. It's just I have a lot of people that come from PSL that join our party and all these other organizations, and they just straight up. It's kind of stupid, but what they say is that when they're there and like with them, everyone's super like uptight and they have like a sour face and like no one's allowed to laugh or like be normal. And then there's always someone that's kind of like trying to just make it miserable for everyone by making them feel like guilty for being white or something. And it's like such a cultural difference that we have just on that. We're like, I don't know if they could like fuck with us, honestly. Like we're open. I mean, this is the thing, like regarding like people that are of sexual, we don't ask people what their sexual orientation is. We don't really care. There are people like that in our party for sure. Um but we're the ones that are chill. Like they're the ones that are not chill. You understand? Like we are not the ones who have an issue. They're the ones that have an issue with us because we're too chill in a sense. Like we're too yes, we tell jokes, we're politically incorrect. And no, we don't do this thing. We're not going to pay tribute to some like other flag. We're not paying tribute to the LGBT movement
Let's talk about
because
flags.
yeah, we're
What
not
what
because we
flag
see
should
it
the United States have?
um a new one probably. I like the one that
Okay,
we have,
okay.
but yeah, yeah, for sure a new one, for sure a new one. But no, this thing of like not paying tribute to the LGBT movement, it's almost like it's like a tributary system where like if we don't pay a tithe, they say, "Oh, you hate gay people and trans people," and it's like we just don't agree with this like this idea that it's like a tribe. It's like this like mafia that we have to give tribute to. It's like no,
Should
we
should gay
we
marriage be
don't we don't
legal?
we don't I think that should be a question that's not decided by me, but by the American people themselves. Um, and like, it's kind of my view, you know.
But if what's your personal opinion?
Um, I really haven't given it that much thought, honestly. I think that, hmm, I don't know, honestly. I think it's not really relevant, or I couldn't really come up with an answer because the only correct answer would be according to what society considers normal, according to what society understands as acceptable. Um, I
What is
probably
society but a
well,
collection of
here's what I could say.
individuals?
It's not something I would be interested in advocating for in a society that doesn't have it. I could
The
probably
United
confidently
States
say that.
does have it, however.
Right, right. And I'm not really interested in like reversing it. So there you go. Like
Oh,
if we didn't
okay.
have it, would I crusade for it? Probably not. But we do have it, and I don't really care. Like it's I guess I'm not interested in like reversing it or something, you know?
You don't see any
Um
major drawbacks to it.
um I couldn't really think of like I mean, I think there's a lot I think the bigger issue in the US is like a total breakdown of like norms between men and women and like there's this like big crisis of like people not getting married or like not having kids, and I think
Everyone's
that's a
weird.
bigger issue. Yeah,
Everyone's
everyone's
weird.
kind of become like autistic and stuff, and like people just like straight up don't know how to be normal. And I don't see the like I feel like sexual minorities have always been a very small portion of the population. I don't I don't think they're the problem. I think the problem is that in terms of the norms, people have become terminally online or deeply confused in terms of like how to actually find a wife or a husband or whatever and like have a family and like reproduce.
And
I
I
think that's
think
like a huge
a
crisis.
lot of times, and especially on X, and I'm frustrated by this every time I log in, because this platform is run over with uh, men who
Porn,
have
yeah,
very
porn.
detestable views
Oh,
of women who see them in porn also, yes. Dating
yeah.
app content, discourse about all this. It just seems like
Yeah,
a major issue on both
I kind of
sides.
fucking hate. Yeah, it's like this thing where there's like the incel movement, and they're like, "Oh, are we black pilling? Are we this pilling? Are we red?" All these different pills people are taking, and all this like fucking yip yap about something that used to not be that complicated. We're just
But
like go outside and like talk to women, I guess, and just like do it.
yeah,
Don't even think about it.
would
But
you
now
consider
it's like become, yeah,
if
it's
taking
become this like
power,
crazy thing.
if you
Hmm.
take power, would you ban dating apps?
Uh, I don't know, dude. What I think could be done at a political, or not even necessarily a political level, more a local level, if anything, in terms of like rule. Just create more like social spaces so people can actually like interact and meet each other, and like it'd be okay. Just create more like common social spaces. People, it's that's the problem today is there nobody can like actually go outside and meet people. anymore. There's really very few places people can just like go chill and like interact with their like back in the day when people were living in villages and shit. Like there was like common things people could do, and that's how, you know, that's how, you know, people met, you know, and that's gone. That's just starting to disappear, or it doesn't even exist in the first place. And I think that like that a government could be responsive to that by encouraging more public life in general, more of a public square type of thing,
There's this
and where
idea
people
that the
could learn.
Germans had of the people's houses, which is like a library. I guess today would be like an internet cafe, which is just like a public building where people can go to chill. But in the United States,
Right.
it seems like the lack of. I deeply feel that the United States is not truly a nation. I know you said it was unfinished. I think it's so far away from being finished that it doesn't really have a national character. There is no
But
national
you know what I would
culture.
say? I would say that everyone is becoming like America in that sense, because what we're really talking about is the unique alienation that was brought by like um the digital form of socialization, and that's like becoming universal. Like everyone around the world is becoming like autistic, and like men globally are like have anime waifus, and there's like it's like becoming the norm globally, you know. Japan is like the biggest victim of Americanization you can think of, and that's why I think like maybe America is a very clunky, strange, totally like unfinished nation, but that problem is becoming like a universal one. And that's why I think in a lot of ways I feel like if America can't get its shit together and finish the fight, so to speak, in terms of becoming a nation, everyone else is cooked. Like the rest of the world is cooked.
I
Because the
don't
rest of the
know.
world doesn't even know the rest of the world doesn't know how they're gonna survive this like this like revolution, which is what it is, this revolution in socialization and human existence that's brought about by the information age, plus all these
I
other things that correspond to it.
I have a very different view of how the rest of the world is. I think that for many states, and unfortunately, the decline of the United States is going to result in a new era of prosperity because the super profits that will be
Yeah.
cut off will be retained in these nations. I think in China, they have very strong capital controls. They have very strong social controls. I think
Mhm.
if
I
they
think it's
want
true for
to arrest
China.
all the waifu girlfriends, they can go ahead. And I think the trend
No, no,
globally
that's
is to look at Chinese leadership a little bit more than American leadership. I
see.
do
I
think the
used
U.S.
to.
will have
Yeah.
reaccommodation, but I think it is a cultural revolution that is going to benefit the United States and is going to, not really destroy anyone else. I think it is a necessary project. Carry on.
So I used to have that exact view one for one, and I still think China like has their shit together. And if anyone's going to survive anything, it's going to be China for sure. The decline of U.S. unipolarity is good for the world, and can and should lead to prosperity. But here's the issue: too much of the world is motivated by short-term gain, and the logic, as it stands, is that there will be no passive destruction of the US global system. The US global system, here's my prediction, it's actually crazy. If the US collapses internally, Europe is literally going to come, maybe with Japan, they're going to invade the US to ensure that the system keeps going because that's how much they rely and depend upon it. And like this is a global empire. It's like it's not just the USA. All the elites worldwide, including a lot of the elites within China, it's just the truth. Now Xi Jinping hates these guys and he's fighting them, but they're not all gone, you know? You name it, Russia, Iran, they're there. They are like part of this US global empire and they want to see it go continue. The only way that the US empire can be broken as a superstructure is a political revolution that overthrows and topples a social revolution that topples the elites on a planetary scale. I used to be white pilled and think that, oh, just passively everything will work itself out. But I feel like that's kind of like a reformist delusion. I feel like, yeah, there's going to be a qualitative rupture. World Revolution and the U.S. Civil War have to go hand in hand. Um,
I
because
don't
this empire is
necessarily.
deeper.
I
The
don't think
U.S. global
Japan
empire can
has the
survive.
capability. I don't think Europe has the
Yeah.
capability to even handle this proxy war. I don't think that the breakup of the United States will lead to
Look, the
restoration and
U.S.
invasion.
crisis,
I think it
the
will lead to
reason there's
major
a U.S.
crises in the first world, in what is Europe and what is Japan, in these
Yeah.
strange parasitical states that do have this dependence. But I think, maybe a collapse of the European Union or a collapse of Japan, I do see these as proxies of the United States ultimately. Maybe you
No,
could
they,
talk
they
about
are, but
Israel.
here's
If
the
we go to
conclusion.
Israel, we can have a little bit of more of a discussion of, maybe that they are installing leadership and are acting in a way to maintain the U.S. empire.
They are, but let me tell you something. It's not when we talk about the USA, there are two Americas, right? One America is the domestic political regime that formally is based in the Constitution. We have the branches of that's the overt government we have, right? Um, and it has to appease domestic concerns and guarantee a minimal level of prosperity, or else out come the torches and pitchforks, you name it. Okay, then on the other hand, we have this global empire that formed in the post-war period. Now, the two are not the same. The global empire is a system that probably could survive the collapse of the USA because the system is not based in any enumerated powers of government that exist within the Constitution. It's based in the military industrial complex, the global CIA networks of NGOs and hegemony, academia, media, institutions. You have U.S. bases around the world. I mean, there's a level of control and governance, financial, political, military, intelligence that exists that is almost autonomous from the USA as a political entity proper, right? And the reason there's this contradiction is because the empire, what is necessary for the continuation of the empire is starting to contradict the immediate interests of US domestic political governance, right? And that's why there will be a civil war here. There will be this breakdown. But the forces of the US global empire will they want to reconstitute the country, get rid of the constitution, and basically fully conform the USA as we know it to this global empire, which is newer, right? And that's really what the agenda has always been. It's been this. I'm not saying people think that I'm I think the Constitution's sacred or something. It's not really that. It's just there is an agenda to get rid of the U.S. Constitution because it is limiting the ability for the empire to control domestically, at
I
home, so that it can continue globally, right?
I think that this is, you say it's the white pill, black pill dichotomy, where it's like the more doomer view, and I'll give you an even blacker pill, which is this has already happened. This happened when they killed the Kennedys. This happened when they killed Martin Luther King. This happened when they killed his brother, the brother of the Kennedy that ran to try and investigate it. They killed Malcolm X. They killed Huey P. Newton. The Constitution does not have any political force to command the American political project. And all of these elites that you talk about, as communists, we got to say it. The one thing they care about is capital gains, is the line going up. And what I think will lead to the U.S. collapse, what I think will lead to the Civil War, what I think will, heighten these contradictions that we're already seeing, is a breakdown of the profit pouring in, and I think that is coming soon. Last quarter, the United States GDP contracted. That is not something that is supposed to happen under capitalism. The projections for this quarter, they're going to come out tomorrow with the actual numbers, which then they'll continue to revise downward. Last quarter, it went down half a percentage. I believe that the predictions are incorrect, that there is going to be a continuing decline, and at some point the stock market is going to collapse, and a lot of the elites are going to profit immensely off this and pour their capital off into other markets so they can continue sucking blood, especially the ones who have no accommodation with the United States, who have no loyalty, like Japanese or Israeli or Chinese elites who have their money in the U.S. stock market. And as soon as the political crisis is antagonized by this economic breakdown is when things are going to get really ugly in the United States. And if there is an
Um,
invasion of the United States by Japan or by the European Union, it will be invited in by some faction that is trying to cling to
Absolutely,
some form of
absolutely.
institutional power.
No, yeah,
And
I thought that was a given when I was saying that. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's going to be like Gavin Newsom and like the Democrats that invite Europe and NATO to come and restore American democracy, for sure. I never thought that it would be like just them. But to what you're saying, look, I also think that to your point about like the like political takeover already having happened, I think that's true informally. The assassinations, I mean, on the books, on the formality, we still have this like semblance of the USA and a constitution on the books, right? It's still bullshit in practice, but like on the books, yeah, on paper. Um, but I think even that is what's like being called into question now. There's like a constitutional crisis with the conflict between the executive and the judicial branch. You know, Gavin Newsom fighting with Trump about like who has authority over the military. Pretty crazy stuff. And that's the type of stuff that I think is actually formally going to lead to a dissolution of the USA. But I will say, to your point about the economic change and collapse, I would argue that's actually what already happened. It happened in 2008. You can maybe argue it happened in 71. And the whole system has been propped up by sheer political will alone since then. It's not really like a consistent economic logic of capitalism that's autonomous. It's political will. They have control over the credit system, not the government per se, but this cartel of banks that has become the shadow government that controls the Federal Reserve. They are keeping it going. They rigged, the political system. Obama bailed them out. They made sure that at the level of government, everything would continue smoothly. By economic logic, everything should have collapsed after 2008. But the reason it's being propped up is political will. And the question is, for how much longer can that happen? A lot of people think indefinitely. I've talked to a lot of smart people who told me this can keep going forever. If there's no political change, if there's no political will, if there's no war, if there's no some revolution globally, this can keep going for a very long time. Um, it's almost like we're entering a post-capitalist world where like the logic of markets and capital accumulation is no longer even in command. It is in principle, that's what the elites are motivated by. But in order to facilitate the continuation of capital accumulation and profits, like ironically, they've had to institute like a type of planned economy that's dominated by political willpower.
absolutely,
Um,
all economies are planned. Some are planned by bureaucrats, and some are planned by market forces directing bureaucrats. But I would like to
right.
move on from this because we're getting close to the end of our time here, and I want to ask you about some current events. I would like to know your view on the Trump Epstein scandal. Do you believe Trump is a Epstein pedophile?
Um, yeah, probably.
All right, sweet. Let's move on. Palestine, I think, is the biggest issue that represents an opportunity for the left, not only in the United States, but across the globe, because there is a global opposition to the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And I think for many parties on the left, it is an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, or in some cases, to fail this test, as AOC did, sending, what, $500 million to Israel for the Iron Dome. How can the American Communist Party and communist parties around the world seize this opportunity to lead the people against this terrible, terrible crime against humanity?
Well, in the USA, we first and foremost need to fight. We need to go on a crusade against the corruption because that's what it is. It's corruption and bribery and control that's illegal, technically. by the Israel lobby and by the Zionist lobby, be they evangelical, Jewish, or something else. It doesn't matter. They control our politics, and they need to be overthrown. And I feel like the strongest way to do that is from a constitutional appeal to constitutional legitimacy. You know, because they're literally taking over. I mean, they have taken over. And the U.S. is the number one enabler of the Zionist genocide. If there was no U.S. supply of military weapons and aid, you know, there would be no Israel. So we're in the belly of the beast. It falls on us more than anyone else to take the most unconditional and principled stance against Zionism. Any pussyfooting, like with AOC or whatever, it's complete treachery, it's Nazism, it's fascism, it's complete betrayal of the international proletariat. Because we're in the belly of the beast, we need to be especially compelled to have unconditional solidarity with forces of resistance, obviously within legal limits, because we don't want to go to jail. But, you know, the thing that I can't forgive is, you know, American leftists who are like, well, I just condemn Hamas. And it's like, who the fuck are you to say that? You know, there's a genocide that's being funded by us, wouldn't exist without us. It's our responsibility to fight against it and fight against our culpability and fight against, you know, the Zionist control of our politics. And that's the forefront. And I think that is in the material interest of the American people, actually, because we don't
I
have a
agree.
government that's looking out for the American people or the common people. It's only looking out for the global empire and for the Zionist entity.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about two last subjects before we go, which are sort of the Nazi or imperialist Zionist alliance, where you have the far right who is directing, you know, support for the Zionist project because they see the dual benefit of boosting domestic nationalism, of expelling Jews to Israel, sending them to colonize Palestine, and then also the benefit of having a dagger in the heart of Arabia, in the heart of Eurasia, to twist and to hurt and to harm and to continue expanding this imperial project. How do we challenge the far right when we're trying to dominate the conversation, when we're trying to lead the people against Zionism?
Um, Sorry, I was eating something. My bad. So the first step that we've got to take is understand how, you know, a lot of the framing of the far right, where this is like a question of the eternal Jew or something. You know, I'm not saying that's bad because Jews are in danger of anti-Semitism, because I don't think that's true. I don't think Jews are in danger. Okay, in the U.S., I don't think they're victims in the U.S. right now. You know, or in the West. I think that that promotes defeatism. It promotes obscurantism, and oftentimes the loudest proponents of this view don't actually have any solidarity with the resistance. So it's a false anti-Zionism. And then the second thing I'd say is that the other far right, which is like the one that's in power, you know, Peter Thiel, J.D. Vance, BAP, Curtis Yarvin, you know, I don't know if you're familiar with these names. They're like a Zionist far right that are tied to international networks with the Jacobit, whatever, fuck, what was his name? The revisionist Zionists. Jabotinsky, yeah. You know, the revisionist Zionist school, which has always been the driving force of Israeli state principle, you know. They have this, they're the ones in power. They actually are the biggest threat because they have a really sinister interpretation of the quote unquote the Jewish question, which has been universalized in a way to where it's like it is this kind of extremely anti-human idea that, like, well, from the Zionist angle, from the revisionist, they're like, okay, Jews have always been victims, so we have to create like a fascist state where might is right, and we're just going to basically destroy and crush the weaker and inferior races and yada yada. But that's also being like adopted by the far right in the West as well. It's just like extremely anti-human mutation of Herzl's original like libtard enlightenment thing. And it's nihilistic at the core. It's tied to Silicon Valley's like transhumanist agenda. It's tied to fundamentally like a literal anti-human agenda, actually, um, which wants to completely destroy any semblance of morality and shared values, or even a common human existence in the first place. So it's like, think of the polar opposite of Xi Jinping's idea of a common prosperity of humanity, part of Xi Jinping thought, right? This is like the total polar opposite of it, right? And it's this really wicked notion. You'll see a lot of these people, they call themselves race realists, trying to combine modern science, or postmodern science, I like to call it, with a return to the scientific racism. And they're doing this through this gene bullshit. I don't know if you want to get into Lysenkoism. We don't have time.
No, please don't talk about
But,
Lysenko, dude. Please don't talk about Lysenko.
no problem, no problem, no problem. It's
Thank
okay.
you.
Some people are not prepared for the truth, and that's okay. But
I have
I
seen
mean, we just need
genes.
longer. You can't show me a gene. There's no such thing. Come on. But anyway, look, all memes aside. But I am kind of serious about it, actually. But all that aside, they have this. They're trying to say that haplogroups are races. They're trying to say that all this is rooted in like the revisionist Zionism, though, or at least it's like really connected to it. Because the revisionist Zionists, they see Jews as a race, not just as a nation. They see it as like a DNA, blood, not just blood. It's like this new twist on like rationalistic science that it's rooted in. It's tied to the Silicon Valley agenda, which is basically saying, okay, we looked at the science. The science says that black people are subhuman, and that all the brains are different and whatever. And we need to create a new techno-feudal order where everyone is basically like a serf and a slave, and only the genetically superior will like enjoy privileges and eventually ascend to the next stage, which is merging with machines. They have these crazy fucking ideas. It sounds crazy, but do your research, and this is what these people believe. And it's super dangerous, actually. Super. Well, I don't like to like fearmonger because I think they're gonna fail. But like that is what's in power. That's what's been in power. Mark Andreessen and all these fucking creeps from Silicon Valley, like it's all connected. Anyways, that sounds too crazy or what?
No, well, a little bit, but I think it's just a question of what language we choose to use. I think you are correct when you say it is fundamentally anti-human, and there is a lot of demonic influence in what they're saying. They're truly possessed by forces that are not human, that are evils, that are fueled by their desire that is out of control. And I'm getting into the symbolism here, but it brings me back to what I did talk with Vijay Prashad about, which is the responsibility of the left and the vision of the global South left, or at least of the Chinese project of BRICS, to build up this common prosperity. And this also has a spiritual element of common decency, common morality, where in this postmodern world we find some commonality because we all know that some things are demonic, some things are wrong. What Trump did with Epstein is demonic. It is wrong. What the Nazis and their demonic ideas about race and about IQ that exist to divide humans and to create a hell on earth is fundamentally wrong. And we do need, and we have the responsibility as the people who are trying to lead, to purge this evil, to expel this evil, to crush this evil, and to name this evil. And I think it is very difficult to dispel some of these myths online because there's such an echo chamber and there's such a control of this techno feudal postmodern world we live in that they have seized with an iron grip. Like Elon Musk, he's tweeting he's getting 60 million views. It's not because, he's an especially insightful guy. It's because he's rich, he's famous, and he owns the platform. And the challenge is then to build something outside of that, or even within it, try to challenge it. And I don't know where we go from here. How do we organize the masses? How do we organize the great masses of humanity that do despise these demonic attitudes, that do despise these demonic activities? How do we unify them? How do we break all this programming? And that's what I'm going to ask you, because you're supposed to give the answers here. So good luck.
So look, it's always going to come down to two things if you're asking me for the solution to what's going on, right? One, you got to reassert the question of what sovereignty is. What does it mean to be truly sovereign, popular sovereignty? Okay, there should be sovereignty over tech in general, right? First of all, there needs to be sovereignty in terms of organizations being able to control their own tech, being able to even control their own infrastructure and hardware. That begins with organization. Organization's everything. And that leads me to the second thing, right? In addition to sovereignty, we need to raise the property question. That's what communism is all about. If you read back to the earliest writings of Marx, it's all about the property question, right? And the property question, a lot of people personalize it, and that's the problem. They say, oh, is this a question of, like what if I own my toothbrush and who should use my no. Property is not personal, okay? Property is an institution. And the problem is we don't have frameworks in which we can question property as an institution without personalizing it and making ridiculous analogies of, okay, so you're going to take my shit and whatever. It's like we need a new property question. We need a new communism that says, what does it mean to actually own something? And economic ownership, should that be off limits from the question of political solutions, from the question of the future of society itself? And my answer is no. We need to actually raise that question to the fore once again. And I don't think we should turn. I agree. Look, there's a lot of Silicon Valley guys that would say, look, the government, it's outdated. It's a big bureaucracy. You give them control of all the tech, they're going to shit it up. Yeah, actually, I agree with that. I don't want to give the current rotten bureaucracies control of tech. I want a new form of popular sovereignty, a new form of political power to be created. Just like Soviet power was created in 1917, it was totally new. And that's what we need, one that's updated and adapted to the era that we live in, that can exercise control, sovereignty, and true ownership over the infrastructure, the common infrastructure, especially the infrastructure for communication and the flow of information. So that's my answer. I don't know if it's too vague, but my answer is basically the ACP. It's always going to be my answer. Our party.
I think that's, a better answer than most people have. Let's move on to what is going to be our second to last question. Just a quick yes, no. Is mega communism dead? You told me it was always a meme, or I don't know. Give a short response to this, please.
No, it's not dead. It's actually more alive than ever. It's more relevant than ever. Because he was always anticipating this moment.
How do you feel about the expert analysts who are saying that MAGA Maoism is truly the ideological formation that is prepared to challenge for the leadership of MAGA, that MAGA communism does not have the mass line, that MAGA communism is focused more on, the cult of personality around Trump, whereas MAGA Maoism is organic. It's coming from the people. It desires to challenge for control of the MAGA movement. It has at least one proponent recently in Marjorie Taylor Greene, who launched her campaign to seize a little bit of power back from the elites, to at least demonstrate who is on what side, with her vote for releasing the Epstein files, with her vote against sending more military spending money to Israel. Do you think MAGA communism is perhaps a little bit less suited than MAGA Maoism for challenging for the hearts of the people and of the ideal of making America great again? Which
I don't think there's a distinction. Yeah, I can answer both those. I don't think there was ever a distinction. Like MAGA Maoism was just a way for journalists to say, oh yeah, the MAGA communists were right, but instead of communism, we're going to say Maoism because we don't want to pay them their tithe and give them credit for anticipating that. Yeah, like MAGA, I would say the only difference is that MAGA communism has the element of like intention to actually bring Marxism to the MAGA masses and not just like have it be a spontaneous wait for the spontaneous moment. We always were trying to be here for this moment. We were thwarted, honestly, by leftists. They tried to they did sabotage us, frankly, by but we had to spend too much time fighting them back. That took away from our ability to MAGA masses in time enough to make communism dominant as a tendency. But I'm patient, and I think it's already starting to happen. People are open minded. MAGA people are more open minded than ever to new ideas. But I don't see a distinction between the two. And then the second thing I would say is that when was America great? Well, I think that the question America was great when it had a clear understanding of what popular sovereignty was, which was in its revolutionary moment. Now, did that ever institutionalize itself in any kind of way? No, it didn't. But that moment where that's my interpretation of it. Make America great again is roll the dice again. Okay. It's about rediscovering popular sovereignty because the form of popular sovereignty that we have, which is in the institutions, and it's dead. Okay. So there's this new one that's cybernetic that's forming based on the information age, and it's relitigating the question of national popular sovereignty. The whole reason Trump won in 2016, 2015, mainly, or at least it was a big shadow that was following his campaign ever, was the fucking internet shit. The libtards admitted it with emphasis they placed on Cambridge Analytica and Facebook memes and stuff. So, and the Russian interference hoax. So make America great again is not about, to me, it's not necessarily about restore a previous state of affairs. It's more like, let's now relitigate the question of the popular sovereignty that underlies the American state. Because the one that we have now is false, inadequate, or dead.
So, to paraphrase, it may mean make America greater still, or go through another revolutionary moment, a process of transformation that could make America greater, to just heighten the nation, to elevate the nation, to progress the nation, if you will.
It's not. It's not. It's the point is, it's not about this thing of, oh, we want to just improve them. That's superfluous. Everyone wants to improve their country. It's more like go through this revolutionary process so that we can actually be a nation, a sovereign nation. Now, is that nation greater than the one that exists? Well, the problem is that we're facing the question of, do we even have popular sovereignty? Is this nation great or worse, even ours? Does it even belong to the people anymore? Or has it ever belonged to the people institutionally, So that's a more relevant question to me. I don't does America need to be greater than it is now? Is less of an important question to me than what is America? Are we being honest about what we are as a nation? Who are we? How do we discover what we are?
What is America? Who are we? Who is an American? Another position where the Communist Party differs from most left-wing parties on this is their view of immigration. And sometimes the position is to, the negation of open borders, which is a very popular line to just say and be like, oh, well, no country has open borders. We're not calling for open borders. But I would like to ask you to offer a positive vision of what are the pathways to become an American. Is someone who is sweating and bleeding in the fields to feed Americans an American if they've lived here without papers illegally? What does it mean to be an American?
I
Who
don't
is the
support
American people?
I don't support the mass deportation of migrant laborers. That's for sure. And I don't think I think an American is someone who is loyal to this land, to this country, and to this form of collective existence. I think an American is someone who, in the midst of a revolutionary circumstance, would stay here and fight for the revolutionary forces of their country and be loyal to it to that extent, And some migrants wouldn't be. Some migrants that came here recently from the other side of the world, for example, to be engineers, if there was shit that went down, they'd probably go back home where it's safe. I would say those people aren't real Americans. So I don't have an idea of American that's based on blood or even necessarily like your culture. It's more like even the Mongol tribes, they would let people in if you ride or die with them. You know, you want to join the tribe, then fight in battle with us. Um, so I have more of a dynamic view of how to be part of a nation, how to be initiated into a nation. It's neither just culture or ethnicity, meaning blood. It's something more fundamental. It's a common principle. But I would say that, on the question of mass immigration, I'm not against flows of population between countries. What I'm against is the anarchy where this is all decided individually, even though at an aggregate collective scale, that's where the impact happens. I believe in a centrally planned economy where population flows are planned on a rational basis, not left to the anarchy of markets.
I think, as we've talked about before, to a certain extent, the U.S. economy is planned and has been planned for many years. Especially, poignant example of this is during World War II with the Bracero program. Many Mexicans were invited across the border, enabled in order to fight for the United States or to participate in the war production of the United States during World War II, to fight effectively against fascism, against Nazi Germany, against Imperial Japan. And this was a project that involved, at the end of it, deporting all of these people, or not all of them, but certainly millions and millions of people who came across the border and fought and participated in the war production. In many cases, joined the U.S. Army and literally fought against the forces of reaction in the world. And what I would like to tie this into a follow up question is, what is the unique? People always talk about the American exceptionalism in slightly, negative terms. But I want to expand the definition of American to look at the whole American continent, to look from, Greenland down to Tierra del Fuego, and to look at this and say, this continent in history is outside of the old world. It is outside of the history of the old world. It does exist in some state as an exception. And what view does the American Communist Party have of the integration of America as a continent, of potential allies for the anti-demonic forces that exist in the United States? Some of these forces have seized power already in Latin America and are speaking of common decency and are working towards common decency. And to some extent, they're revisionist or social democratic, but they are condemning the Israeli genocide. They are organizing legal action in the United States against this. Like my country, Bolivia, is governed by a man, Luis Arce, who calls himself a Marxist and a Leninist and who has spoken in clear terms about these things. What Pan-American project is the unique opportunity of the Communist Party of the United States to lead? Or do you feel that it is strictly along national lines that the struggle must be waged first?
So I regard all these sovereign, oftentimes revolutionary states across Latin America as a legitimate American state revolutionary traditions. But the ACP's view is basically that the goal needs to be the total elimination and expulsion of European colonialism from North America, meaning Canada, probably Greenland as well. Now, whether that happens along the lines of Trump's plans or we agree with that is a different question. Probably not, right? But overall, we do include Canada on our map, and we consider it part of one American state. But why we don't include Mexico and other states in our party is because they have their own revolutionary sovereign traditions. So us making claims on Mexico would be chauvinistic. It'd be us saying that we're going to force Mexico to unite with us. We don't want to force Mexico to do anything. We want to take over here and then negotiate dialogue and integration with Mexico on a free and equal basis and hopefully form a union, but one that is between equals and not one just taking the other. Now, do we consider Canada an equal state tradition? No, we don't, because it doesn't even have its own independent state tradition. It's literally still part of the British Commonwealth. They never had their own revolution. Mexico did. These other states often did. But yeah, the long-term goal is forming like a Soviet Union in America, the Americas. But the only way that happens is on an equal basis. We can't just like be laying claim to other territories and saying they belong to us. There has to be a way for it to be agreed upon that it truly integrates both into a common national framework.
I think that that is true, and I think that I'm going to leapfrog from that comment about the unequal treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo that was signed between Mexico and the United States, and how this is still causing contradictions within the United States today, especially in the borderlands, in the states that were Mexican territory, that were ceded to the United States, that have existed legally as the United States for many, many years, but have a unique national character because they are, to some extent, populated still by a different cultural group, which has ties not to a motherland far off in Europe, but to a sovereign state with a national character and as you say, a revolutionary socialist tradition that is much more defined even than the United States. And I think that's a lot of where the nationalism for Mexicans in the United States, like the ICE protest, a lot of the woke right was going crazy and complaining about them waving these flags because they're upset
Yeah, if I
that
could say real
these
quick, I think
redcoats
that
are coming into their communities and grabbing their people and forcing them,
yeah,
across state lines.
if I could say
I'll
quickly,
let you interrupt. Go
if
ahead.
we if we took power very quickly, we'd want to just form a union state with Mexico, like ASAP. So we would want to create a framework for joint sovereignty, basically. That would be my answer, I guess, to the question of like Mexico's old territories. We want a common framework. We want common zones. We want joint sovereignty, joint frameworks where there are exceptions for population flow in regions with more cultural similarity in Mexico. You know, would there be massive disruptions? Let's say we just took 200,000 Americans and put them some random place in southern Mexico. Like that would cause a lot of problems. Even Mexico City right now, like people are getting tired of Americans moving there, right? Because they're causing a lot of disruption. This isn't about dehumanizing people. It's just about understanding these things have to be planned rationally and they have to make sense. I think it makes total sense for Mexico to be especially more integrated with those lands, population wise. But yeah, we'd want to just form a union state with Mexico as soon as we took power. That would be ideal. Would Mexico have to undergo a revolution of its own for that to be possible? To get rid of the capitalist class that exists there? I don't know. It's up to the Mexican people. But we definitely like to negotiate bilateral frameworks for sure that are advantageous for the unique circumstances of Mexican Americans and Mexico.
Are there any other situations, do you feel, where there is complication of the national question like this in the United States?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of complications in general.
Major
But
complications that would result in the necessity of establishing some sort of special autonomous region, for instance, the Black Belt, or I
oh
think
no,
that
I
when
don't.
the
I don't agree with. I don't agree with the idea that Black people are a separate nation. I think they're a unique part of the American nation, which is one nation, and I think that the division of Black and White is a vestige of a immature national project. I used to be sympathetic to that view, but I realized how integrated the Black and White populations truly are, and how unfeasible it would be to divide them by nation. So I don't agree with like balkanization of the USA on racial lines at all. I agree with a new framework of unity of one American nation. But Hawaii, for example, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that we occupy and control Hawaii. If you ask me,
Puerto Rico,
definitely independence for Puerto Rico, just like day one. If we took power, I mean, this is kind of a crazy hypothetical, but like, yeah, we don't believe in any territories or colonies.
Well,
I
that's
totally reject
wonderful.
that.
I really appreciate this conversation. It gave me a lot of insight into how you think about politics, about how you think about geopolitics, and I think it will offer a new view to a lot of our listeners about who the American Communist Party is and what they stand for. So I want to thank you for your time, your patience, and your eloquence.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It was a great interview.
All right, buddy, take it easy, and I'll see you online. See ya.